Hey YouTube, what's happening? It's Richard, founder of Short Term Rental University and professional real estate developer. I said in an earlier video that this has been not only the largest number of deals I've ever done, but also by far an order of magnitude of like 5 times more dollar volume than anything I've ever done. And it's all in like the last 90 days. So I just want to share with you what I've actually done and then why I did it and what the implied like investment thesis and opportunity set is. So the first thing I did is I sold a large home in New York City. I couldn't have been more fortunate. The timing was spectacular. We closed on that on March 2nd, which was 17 days before the quarantine and lockdown of New York City began, and that was sort of like the low of the pandemic. So thank goodness we sold and closed on March 2nd, just 2 weeks before I think real estate values in New York City plummeted. So I got very fortunate with that, and then I rolled that into a 1031. But let's stay with the sales first. I also managed, because it became a seller's market, to sell a property that I had in the Hamptons. It had been on the market for about 12 years, and this is probably the worst investment I've ever made because it was unclear. We bought it for the wrong reasons, and you know, we all make mistakes. This one was a tragic mistake. It took us about 12 years to unwind. And believe it or not, it took a pandemic for us to be able to sell it at a huge loss. But thankfully, we were able to put it under contract because in that gift of quarantine video, I encourage you to look deep and think about yourself and your future and align your future with your belief system and spend the best amount of time and energy on the right places and not the wrong. So this was just a drag and we needed to exit, and my partner didn't really want to exit as big a loss, and there was no buyers. Well, thankfully through the pandemic, somebody came and they wanted to buy it, and so we were really grateful to get that under contract, and that closes in about a week or two. In fact, probably by the time you watch this video, touch wood, it will be closed. We also listed an investment property down in Alabama for sale, only insofar as it no longer had any real value. It's a very solid investment property. It might be even the best performing short-term rental we have from a return on investment perspective. So not necessarily dollars, it's a lesser priced investment, and so 10% of a lower number is a smaller number. And so consequently, it didn't really move the needle. It takes just as much effort and energy to run a small and successful operation as it does to run a big and successful operation. And so consequently, we decided to go ahead and exit that now in this seller's market, hoping for a buyer at a premium. So those are the items. Oh, and then I had the 2 places down in Jackson Hole that if you've been following the channel or certainly attended any of the live events, I talk about them at length. Bought them in my retirement account purely as an investment from the developer with seller financing. And in this seller's market, and the entire investment thesis around Jackson Hole proved true. Tons of people fleeing big urban areas, tons of people fleeing high tax states like New York and California. There's only so little inventory in Jackson Hole. It's almost like you're buying an island in the middle of the mountains. It's actually called a valley. And consequently, real estate there is absolutely on fire. And so when I saw that opportunity, I decided to list them at record-breaking dollars per square foot. And the question became, would they appraise? And so consequently, sold out of New York City, sold in the Hamptons, sold 2 locations in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and have a place in Alabama listed for sale. So those are on the sale side. On the purchase side, through the 1031 exchange, I've purchased a boutique hotel in California, in Palm Springs, California to be specific. And again, I'm not closing on these until about a week or 2, likely after this video comes out. But I'm a little bit superstitious and don't like to talk about anything, so we'll just call it Palm Springs, California. And there's another opportunity, a bed and breakfast in Palm Beach, Florida. And so those are the items that I'm purchasing via 1031, as well as I continue to expand my holdings here in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, as this investment thesis, I believe, is in the very early stages. We're maybe in inning 1 or 2 of 9. So tons of stuff for sale, tons of stuff that I'm buying. We're talking tens of millions of dollars and a dozen or so transactions, all since COVID happened. And the question is, why so much activity in such a short time period? And the answer is as follows. 1, I really did what I filmed in that video, the gift of quarantine. Eric and I spent an incredible amount of time thinking, discussing, reaching deep, and it's not easy or fun work. In fact, it was really challenging. One day we felt one way and the next day we woke up, we felt differently, and then we reversed. And with the financing headaches that we had, it was, let's break that deal and let's focus on this, and then we'd reverse that. So it was agonizing. And I mean, it's a really good problem to have, and I'm not trying to minimize how fortunate we are, but I am saying that there was a lot of decision making and going back and forth and updating and changing and thinking about our why and what we want to do. And so those are the decisions that we made. But ultimately, what I would say is I'm positioning myself for life after COVID for the next 50 years. And I'm looking at my portfolio in that regard. So small individual onesie, twosie type properties all over the country, while well diversified, make a ton of sense. And if I didn't want to expand aggressively, then I would probably stay with that. And I want to caution you from selling a property that's performing well just to take a profit. Real estate is a long-term investment. There's a lot of friction and transaction costs. There's all sorts of closing costs, moving costs, furnishing costs, renovation costs, your time. Put a dollar amount on your time. How much time did you individually spend fixing that place up? Make sure you're being compensated for it. And if you have a reason to sell, then sell. But if you're not a flipper and you're a buy and hold person, even if you've got a $100,000 gain or $200,000 gain, in my own opinion, it's foolhardy to try and time the market and sell at that higher price, because guess what? You have what's called reinvestment risk. Once you do that sale and you get that $100,000 or $200,000 in profit, what do you buy? And is that more risky or less risky from what you just exited? And if you were to put it in the stock market at or near all-time highs, is that more risky or less risky? So make sure that whatever move you do, whether you're buying or selling, is positioned in the way that you see the world on a go-forward basis after the pandemic clears. The pandemic is incredibly painful, and I don't want to minimize anything about it, but just recognize it's a moment in time. It's literally a moment in time, and for the rest of your life, you'll look back and you'll recall it. But this is your opportunity for you to reshuffle your cards, figure out what your portfolio, your ideal portfolio should look like. Knowing what you know now, having seen quarantine, having seen what your locality and the government officials have done, what they've allowed to stay open, what they've closed, how they've handled it, seeing how tourism has been impacted, seeing whether business travelers come or don't, whether tourists continue to come. You have the benefit of all that knowledge that we just gained. Right? It's not hypothetical. You witnessed it. You lived through it. Your businesses either gained or suffered through it. So with that information, take a forward-looking view for the next decade. How do you want to be positioned? And if you have items that are generic, underperforming, not connected to your why, no longer personally satisfying, then I encourage you very much to sell, because this is a great market to sell. But if you do sell, what are you going to do with those proceeds and try and position yourself in the proper way? And so all of this activity and all of these transactions and all of the agony and negotiation and lawyers and fees and closing costs and all that stuff, I've weighed carefully, and I've done so methodically in order to position myself in what I consider to be the optimal locations, the optimal business sizes, the optimal way to monetize as much possible gain and profit going forward as possible. So I exited the old legacy positions for the right reasons. I'm entering into new positions for the right reasons, and I don't want to minimize the fact that I'm taking risk capital. This isn't a guarantee. There's no certainty in buying these small hotels in California and in Florida. If they were to be shut down for COVID or some other pandemic, I have a lot of risk on the table. However, I'm an entrepreneur. I get paid to manage risks that other people won't. I believe I can handle it better than others. And the main reason I believe I can handle it better than others is because I have long-lasting permanent capital, and therefore I have staying power. So if you don't have staying power, you don't have dry powder, then I encourage you to be less risky. But if you've got a long-term vision of the world, like Jeff Bezos, who's now the wealthiest man in the world, and I just read yesterday that he has more personal net worth after a divorce and giving his ex-wife, I think it was $35 billion, he's worth more than like 5 companies in the S&P 500's total market capitalization. I think Coca-Cola, General Electric. And the remarkable thing, the reason he's the wealthiest man in the world is because he had a different view of the world and a longer time horizon. He took so much grief for not being profitable for the first decade of operations and even into the second decade of operations, and people were naysayers and they couldn't make a profit and he wouldn't do well and so on and so forth. And he just kept his eye on the ball, had strong conviction and confidence about what the world would look like, and especially in this COVID pandemic, stay at home, everybody buying things from Amazon. He's now the wealthiest individual on the planet, and he's worth more than several Fortune 500 companies because he had a different view and a different length of time horizon. So just think about yourself and position yourself properly. I'd love to hear in the comments below what you think and what moves you've made during this COVID. What did you buy and what did you sell? As well as what do you think of my opportunity set, what I'm doing? I'd love to hear that. And I always encourage you to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks, friends.